Welcome to another segment of Training Videos from the House, brought to you by Stickmen University. This session will focus on identifying and dealing with pre-existing damages on moves. The first thing we will look at is what is pre-existing damage. We can define this as damage to an item prior to moving it. Most items that you move will have some sort of previous damage. It just varies in nature and how concerned the customer is about the damage. Our job is to point out the items that have damage without insulting the customer. This can be very tricky and requires you to use tact when discussing the items with the customer. How to identify previous damage. When you conduct your walkthrough with the customer, you will want to quickly take a look at the items you will be moving to identify any previous damage. Previous damage can be found on almost anything, such as a small scratch to a wood table, the wood floor, or the wall. Or it can be a crack in the mirror or glass. You will also need to look for damage that might not have been noticed by the customer. It's the damage that customers don't see on a daily basis that they think may have occurred during the move. Be aware of all of these damages and make sure the customer is aware of them as you proceed through the walkthrough. This will allow you to properly communicate with the customer about the damages from the beginning of the move. This will help after the move, in the event the customer says the items were damaged in the move. What to look for on wood surfaces. Wood damages are easier to distinguish between recent and old incidents based on the dirt and oil buildup in the scratch or gouge. A fresh wood scratch looks very different than the one that has been there for a while and is somewhat worn. The older damage is typically lighter in color. Look at the item during your walkthrough, and if necessary, note the damage on the pre-existing damage form. The release of liability could also be used in place of the pre-existing damage form. However, it is best to use the pre-existing damage form to gather as much information as possible. Each time you mark an item with pre-existing damage on the form, make sure you get the customer's initials. This will help ensure there are no questions about when the damage occurred to the item. Other items to look for during the walkthrough include damage to walls, floors, door frames and jambs, appliances, couches, and mattresses. Look for hidden damage from previous moves. Sometimes you may find broken legs on dressers that the customer hasn't tried to move since they arrived. Also, furniture can cover up previous damage, and the customer may not be aware of it. It is best to let the customer know right away there is pre-existing damage to an item. When spotting the damage, it is important to remember this is customers' personal belongings. Be cautious of pointing out every nick and scratch, as it may lead to the customer getting defensive. You may need to approach each situation a little differently and get a read on the customer. Pointing out too many items may not be necessary, while pointing out too few can leave you open to damage claims after the move. There is no exact science to this, and it becomes easier to identify damages and communicate those to the customer as you participate in more and more moves. This brings us to the conclusion of pre-existing damages. For more information, please contact Training and Development at training@2men.com.